Hello, friends. Welcome back to Adobe Live. I'm your host, Fabiola Lara, and today we're here with producer and editor Jamie McArthur. Today he's going to be sharing how to actually fix things in post, which I know, we all kind of dread. It's a controversial topic here, fixing stuff in post, but today we're going to learn a ton of tips and tricks from him. Now, before I let him tell you more about his work, remember to hit subscribe to Adobe Live on YouTube so you don't miss our next stream. And shout out to the chat. Thanks for joining us today. I see that we have here Umacorn, Alessandra, Robert. Thanks so much for being here. It's always great to see you guys. And all right, Jamie, it's time for you to let everyone know everything that you do, your work, and what we're getting into today.
Cool. Thank you, Fabiola. It is exciting to be here. This is actually my third time at Adobe Live. This first time was at when I was at Sundance at the very beginning of this year. Long story short, my name's Jamie. I'm a video producer and editor, predominantly an editor out of the Palm Springs area of California. I also get my hands dirty with some video work, some photo work, some social media management, and things of that nature. And the most recent job that I've been on, which is just finishing up right now, which I'm super excited to close out, has been a mini docuseries for Disney Plus slash Nat Geo. And I've been doing a lot of little things here and there that I'm going to show you today that has applied to that job, and also some other jobs that I've done in the past. So again, super excited to be here, and we're going to talk about some fun tricks within Premiere.
I can't wait to see it. I can't wait to see it. Do you have a clip for us of your work that you wanted to play, or do you want to get right into the stream? Up to you.
Oh yeah, I probably should have played my reel while I was explaining that, but I'll go ahead and play it a little bit and just give a quick little rundown of some of the things that we're going to talk about today, which is track mats, masking, blurring out faces or something of that nature, and then we're going to tie all that stuff together at the very end and talk about some green screen tips and tricks. Most of these things you probably think are going to be an After Effects procedure, but we're actually going to do all of this in Premiere. Obviously, any of these things could take that extra level by going into After Effects, but I'm going to try to make this really basic, really easy, and give everybody a chance to be able to jump into some of these concepts right within Premiere. And hopefully, maybe if you're intrigued with it, you could take that to the next level in After Effects or any other application that you see fit. So yeah, this is just a sample of my work over the past year or so. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to put most of my most recent work up on here. Hopefully in a few months I will be able to, but yeah, you can get a sense of some of the things that I work with on a local scale, small businesses, real estate agents, e-commerce, and then I've worked with a couple bigger companies like Google, Sundance for the last 2 years, and then again, like I said, Disney Plus and Nat Geo for my last project that I'm working on. So excited to be here once again.
I am so impressed by your reel. I feel like you have such a variety of footage there and a variety of techniques. And I feel like today, I know from previous live streams that everyone dreads having to open another program. So the more that we can do in Premiere Pro, I'm just so excited that we get to see this. So let's get right into your project. I'm really stoked. I personally, a lot of these things that you're mentioning, I need to start implementing. So I can't wait to see.
Yeah, well, the past couple jobs that I've been on, I've been constantly hearing, I think it's almost an editor's worst nightmare to hear, let's fix it in post on set. Fortunately, most of the time you're not even on set, so you're getting all this kind of after the fact, and you're like, oh, I have to do what? So yeah, hopefully this will kind of alleviate your concern when you hear that let's fix it in post line on set, and you'll be like, all right, I got this, no problem. We're gonna fix it in post.
That's what
Cool.
we need. We need more confidence because I know fixing stuff in post can sometimes it's easy and sometimes you're like, what did I just sign up for? And next thing you know, you're on Adobe Live trying to figure out how you're going to do this.
Exactly. So hopefully everybody that's tuning in is not up against the wall in this, but if you are, we'll help you out and hopefully we can get you going on some tricks here.
Yeah,
Um,
definitely. If you need some advice, now's the time. Drop your questions in the chat. I'm looking for your questions. I'm fielding them. I'm getting them over to Jamie. So if you have questions, especially post-production questions, bring them on over. This is your chance.
and I would love to hear some horror stories or positive stories that the last time you heard let's fix it in post. When was the last time you heard that? And what type of scenario did you get involved in? I'd love to hear your own
Yes, this is a
stories,
safe
horror or
space,
non.
everyone. This is a safe
Exactly.
space. You can leave the client names anonymous.
Yes, please do. Cool. So the first thing that I wanted to talk about has a couple different names for it. The tool itself is called Track Matte. It's an effect that we're going to use in Premiere. A lot of different ways to utilize this. The most important thing to know is that it's using, essentially the transparency of a clip. So I'm going to give some use cases and some practicality as we're going through here. But to start, I just have a sequence that I'm going to start with. Now, pretty much everything that I've gotten, every clip that I have in here is actually from Adobe Stock. I had a plethora of credits that I had to use up, and most of the things that I've been filming, not really conducive for what we wanted to talk about today, or I can't use it. So I'm using some Adobe Stock here to show you what I'm going to be talking about here. So
Perfect.
I have this little nice close-up of a pool. It's very appropriate for the season that we're in and my location of Palm Springs.
Mhm.
So what do we want to do with this? Well, the first thing that I want to do, well, I'm going to map something. So what does that mean? What is a map essentially? It could be a couple different things, but essentially it is a shape or an image or a text that we're going to utilize to actually cut out a piece of that video. And let me take a step back as well. Everything that we're doing right now is called compositing. And if you don't know what compositing is, the basic, easiest way that I can explain that is we're just going to be blending two or more clips together in one cohesive fashion. So what do I want to do with this clip? The first thing that I want to do, I'm going to kind of bring in a couple different elements here, but I want to just bring in some text. I'm going to cut out some text. You probably have seen this effect before of an image getting cut out of the text or vice versa. So I'm going to use my text tool down here, or T is the keyboard shortcut for that. And I'm just going to click any point in my program window up here. I'm going to adjust all that as I want. I've already chosen my text, but normally it's going to default to a different one, and my size of my font is already how I want it. So I'm just going to
Got
type in
it.
a word here. Summer is kind of the appropriate word that just came to mind here. And obviously it's kind of off. This is why I didn't really care about where I'm clicking in that program monitor, because I'm going to use our align and transform tools here to align it horizontally, align it vertically. And then one little trick here that you may want to do is if you right click on your program window, there's a few different ways to get to this, but if you want to check on your safe margins, my text was pretty big, but now I can actually just kind of verify that I'm not going to get chopped off in terms of different screen sizes or depending on where people are playing this from. So my safe margins are good. Also, I have my little safe margin on my toolbar under the program window. If that's something that you want, or if you don't see that, you can always add items onto your program window with the little plus sign. So the plus sign is going to show you a lot of your button, the button editor. These are all the program buttons that you can add to your program monitor if you want. So there's my safe margins. All I did was drag it down to here. And now I have a quick and easy way that I can just kind of toggle that on and off. So definitely
Yeah.
keep in mind, it's a really great tool.
Do you have any other buttons that you tend to use a lot that maybe, they're not the default?
Yeah, the other one that I use all the time is the multicam view. I already have it in there as well. I've dragged that in several times, but that one is also right here, toggle multi-camera view. If you are using
Using it.
multicam and that's something that you use, it's a great tool to just have right there. You can
Yeah,
toggle that
that's a
on and
whole
off.
separate stream, multicam,
Yeah,
but
definitely.
we have also the looping icon. I know that's not
Oh yeah.
always there, and that's a really good one too. I'm sure you use it all the time.
Oh yeah, especially when it comes to graphics and things like that. The looping tool is really clutch. And even with the green screen stuff that we're going to look at, it's really nice to just be able to loop that over and over and over again, so you can see if there's any mistakes within a small period on there.
Cool.
All right, cool. So yeah, love my button editors on there. So now that I have my text in here, now what do we want to do? How do we cut this out of the video on here? This gets a little bit confusing on here. My first initial thought would be, okay, I want to apply this effect to the text, right? That's what I'm trying to edit. Well, that's not entirely true. We actually want to apply this effect that we're going to be applying to the video track that we want to engage with. So in this case, it's my video 2. It's on my second layer here. It's the close-up of the water or the pool. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go to my effects panel in the upper left-hand corner here, or depending on where you have your layout, obviously. And there's a few things that we want to look for, but if you know the name of it, you can always just search for it. So the name of the tool that I'm looking for is called Track Matte. So you can see it's under Video Effects and Keying. But if it was not there, you can simply click on the Video Effects, find the Keying menu, and find whatever you need from that menu. There's a few other really useful tools in there, but for our purposes, the two that we're going to be focusing on today is our Track Matte key and our Ultra key for our green screen. But we'll get there. So
Great.
Track Matte key. Yeah.
So we're going to teaser for what we're going to do next, I'm sure.
Exactly. Yeah, foreshadowing, if you will. So we're going to drag our Track Matte key to the video layer that I want to affect on, not the text itself.
So this is the video layer that you want to fill the text. Am I right?
Yeah, and actually technically it doesn't matter because you'll see one of those tools that we'll be able to use to kind of flip-flop between the transparency of that clip or that shape, whatever it is. In this case, it's our text versus the actual shape of that text. So you'll be able to see how we can change that. Okay. Now, initially nothing happens, so you're probably like, wait, did I do it right? Do I need to add it again? Make sure you don't just keep dragging that track matte key, or otherwise you'll have like 10 of them in the same thing.
Stacks, yeah.
It happens. So now that I have my Track Matte key over, I don't know if I mentioned it, but I slid over to Effects Controls now. Now I can actually see the Track Matte key. Again, nothing has happened in my program monitor yet. So what I want to do is, you'll notice under Matte, it says none. Well, there's why we haven't had the effect on there. When I click on that drop down, it's going to give me every layer above the track that I'm actually engaging with. So in this case, it's 3 or 4. I don't even have anything on 4. So I'm going to choose video 3. And now you actually can see one of the other videos that I have kind of hidden below as I was trying to tease it a little bit. Now what happened? This might be a little confusing. So let's actually hide that layer that I was talking about on here first. So essentially the default is going to take the matte of the shape. In this case, the shape is our text on here. So it takes the shape of the text and it's going to apply that video below it, right? Now, to your point, Fabiola, the easy way, if I wanted to flip-flop that, if I actually wanted the video to kind of play in the opposite way, there's actually a little checkbox here that I can do reverse. And that would actually flip-flop that.
Okay, cool. Yeah, this is exactly what I was asking because I thought it was like not that easy, that you'd have to repeat it, if you mess up, and then you take a few moments trying to figure out which way to go. So that's really sick that you can just reverse it with a check of a button. I feel like that's how Premiere always is. It's like you leave something unclicked and then one day it clicks. Get it?
Yes, I love that. And it's actually one of the features that allows me to I don't have to overthink when I'm adding that track matte, because essentially it's either going to use the shape of that image or that item that we're using. In this case, again, it's the text, or it's going to use the transparency of that shape or that image. So in this case, it actually flip-flopped and is using the transparency. Now, in this case, it's not exactly selling what I want, because it just looks like I have a black text on there, right? So it doesn't look like I did much. Now, my little teaser here, if I enable, I don't know if I mentioned that when I did this, I'm going to enable, I disabled it earlier, I'm going to enable it now. Now we can have a little bit of a fun effect here with the video layer below it. So it's cut out of the video layer that I chose, but now it's revealing the other layer behind it. So this really comes down to that compositing aspect that I'm bringing up. So now we can actually see there's this crazy kind of juxtaposition of imagery happening on here. And
yeah,
then obviously
they look similar in texture, which is interesting.
Right? So it's kind of a fun thing. I also add the fire because if anybody's in California or Northern California or in the areas, there's lots of fires happening right now. Hopefully everybody's staying safe and good in that regard. So I thought that was a nice
Let's think
juxtaposition
about
here.
pools more so. Let's think, yeah, let's
Exactly.
keep
Yeah,
keep it
yeah.
happy, guys.
Yeah, yeah. Depending on what this video is, it could
Yeah.
tell a sad or
Or
a really dark story,
yeah,
right?
yeah, let's go for a more relaxed story, more,
Yeah,
suntan lotion kind of vibe.
we like that. We like that. So that's how we do that initially. And again, if I go back to my video layer that has that track mat, if I do that reverse now that I have the other layer select, you can kind of see that I can get this very different effect by playing with that reverse here.
And you can keep changing the video that's playing underneath it, right? Like you could put multiple clips under there, let's say. I
Of
mean,
course, of course.
you
So
don't
if I
have
have
to, but if you wanted to.
yeah, let's give it a try. I have this little walking guide that I'm going to use later. If we slide that in, I'll put it kind of right in the middle there so you can see where it actually splits. So it doesn't matter. The video, the track mat is actually only affected on video too, but you can see how it engages and it
Yeah.
interacts with the layer below it and my layer above that. Now,
So cool.
there is one other technique that I've used constantly, and it kind of actually plays into even what we're doing right here on Adobe Live. Um, Over the past 2 years and even before that, a lot of the videos that I've been making have been remote. So creating a remote video, filming it on Zoom or something like Riverside. In some of the cases, you can get 4K video. In a lot of cases, you're not getting that full 4K resolution or the resolution that you want. And sometimes the quality isn't great depending on their webcam or their laptop. So another a really great use case for this is let's kind of act like we're creating a Zoom, a podcast or something like that.
Okay.
So we use text here, right? And it cut out that text in a way that makes a lot of sense. Let's do a very similar thing. I'm going to turn my reverse back on here for a minute. Let's do a very similar thing, but instead of using the text that we selected
Mhm.
there, let's actually just create one with a shape. Now, normally what I recommend is you're actually creating the shape outside of Premiere. So you're, creating like some sort of bounding box within Photoshop or Illustrator, something like that that's going to be a little bit more clean. But because we're doing it, I can show you how to do that right away. I'm going to add my safe margins back in just so I have a little bit of a guide of what I'm doing. And then I'm going to go over to our rectangle tool. Now, I could obviously choose the ellipse tool
You
or the
could get
polygon
crazy with it.
tool. Exactly. But for our purposes, I'm just going to use a basic rectangle and I'm going to kind of space this out almost like I have two speakers, just like we're doing here on Adobe
Mhm.
Live. So I'm going to kind of create this bounding box and I'm going to use my safe margins to kind of line that up. And then one thing that you may or may not be familiar with, this is just a standard box with four corners, right? Well, there is a nice little tool under Essential Graphics right here. I'm not even sure what the name of this one is. Maybe it'll tell me if I hover over top of it.
I think it's like corner rounding, something like that.
It's something very simple, right? Rounded
Yeah.
corners, something along those
Yeah.
lines. What that's going to allow me to do is it's going to round that corner for me. Now you could kind of slide it and drag it how you want, or you could just click in. I'll just do 60 as a nice number on there. So
Satisfying.
that is a really fun way to create these cutouts on here that obviously we have the fire in the background, but imagine we had, that person in the background. I'm going to resize this really quick so he's
And this
not.
just happens to be their Zoom call. They're just taking it really, H 4K clearly,
It,
but
yes, exactly. So now you can see that we have this kind of bounding box here and it's framing that in there and we still have the graphic or in this case our pool as
Mhm.
kind of our background and really it's technically a foreground but it's a nice way to kind of break up that and it's going to allow you to actually export your video in a full resolution whatever that might be and you'll be able to kind of make your Zoom video or your Riverside video, whatever it is that you're recording on, a little bit smaller to increase that resolution and that quality a little bit more. So that's a nice little trick. And let's actually take this even one step further as well. So in this case, we have one bounding box on the right-hand side and then this open space. So
Mhm.
obviously this could be used for text if you're doing like a slideshow or a presentation of some sort. So that could be a useful way of doing that. Or in this case, let's actually create a duplicate of this one and see what we can do. Now, I'm gonna use a keyboard shortcut, but we can very much easily just copy and paste this if we wanted to, or duplicate it. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna hold down Option or Alt, and you're gonna drag that up to the next layer, and that's gonna automatically create a duplicate for me. Now you can probably notice automatically that we are running into a slight issue here. Let me move this over with our position here so you can see what I'm talking about. I'm gonna slide that over, just kind of nice and neat on here. So you could probably notice only one of these is affected by our mat, right? So
Right.
how am I going to be able to add both of those into this same track mat? How am I going to be able to affect both of these in the same way so they're both showing the video beneath there? Well, since we're talking about compositing, I'm going to select both of those, and there's a few different ways that you could do this, but my favorite this is literally one of my favorite features within Premiere, and that is the nest tool. So when you nest that together, we can name it whatever we want. In this case, we'll call it bounding. Not bouncing, bounding box nest. And now
Okay.
you can see the reason. There's a couple reasons why I did that. One, I can only choose one of the video tracks on my map. Now, the alternative that I could have done is I could have added a second track mat on here. So let me actually show you that. Let me undo for a second here. Still have what I just did. So in theory, I could have went back to my effects, added another track mat onto here. And instead of choosing video 3 for the track mat here, I could have chose video 4 for the track mat. So that's another way that I can kind of do that. And you'll notice that the reverse is not on. So I want to flip that reverse. That way we kind of have everything uniform. That was the goal. So
So
that would be another technique.
that's kind of neat because if you have the guest track, let's say, and the host track of, this faux podcast, you could track it to each track, right?
Exactly. So you can kind of have that organization on there. The other reason that I bring up this one as opposed to the nest, personally, I like nesting a lot, but you want to be aware of the full workflow before you start using a nest. Specifically in my most recent job with Disney Plus, if you have a finishing team or a turnover team that's handling all of the onlining of this, nesting can be a very problematic thing, especially if you have a lot of clips in here. And we're going to talk about nesting a little bit more. I have a few instances, but essentially it's almost like creating a pre-comp if you're familiar with After Effects, or just a regular sequence. It's almost like creating a separate sequence within Premiere Pro. So when it comes to linking in terms of like proxies and raw files, there's nothing to link to when it comes to a nest. So you do want to be a little bit careful. You want to be aware of your workflow and who's going to be kind of doing the onlining of this if that is a part of the workflow, because nesting could put you in a little bit of a bind on that. You may have to redo
And
all
then
of
you have
your
to
nests in
rebuild
there.
it. Yes. My
Exactly.
personal experience with nesting is like you really have to keep track of it because
Yes.
otherwise you're just like, wait, what is this nesting to what? And how did I do this? And now I have to undo it. So it can be very complex, which is why it's so great. But it can also, depending on the project, be a little too much. So I think you're
Yeah,
totally right. And
exactly.
having the two track mat keys effects is great. It's a great tip.
Now the other way, I'm gonna actually nest this for our purposes. Now, if you're the only one working on this, you're the one doing the onlining and everything like that, then really there's no limitations for the nesting. Again, you just want to be aware of who's going to get access to this afterwards, and are they going to have to deal with that nesting that you've created, or are they going to ask you to rebuild it? So again, just be mindful of your workflow and who you're handing it off to, and vice versa. That way you're not messing with anything. Now,
Definitely.
the one of the reasons why I do like to nest is because let's say that I wanted to add some animation to these bounding boxes, whether it comes
Mhm.
in or out or something like that. Now that I have them nested together, I can uniformly create an animation, whether it's position or scaling. So I could scale these things at the exact same uniform animation.
That makes
Obviously,
a
I
lot
could
of
apply
sense.
that to both, but in this case, it's going to be a one flow right into it, and boom, you've created that
Right.
animation on there. So
That
that's kind of
that
the other
makes
reason.
that makes so much sense, and I feel like because otherwise you'd have to kind of try and get it all aligned, I guess, which would be tricky and just not as efficient as this. So I totally can see why this would be helpful. And yeah, if you have any questions, everyone in the chat, if you have any questions about this, please be sure to drop your questions in the chat. I feel like, you know, I'm getting an amazing tutorial, but I want you guys to also get all your questions answered.
Yes, definitely. Some of these things can get pretty tricky, and especially if you're not doing them like over and over again, it can be something that, even after a while, you come back to it and you're like, oh, what was
Oh,
that
that's the reason that
again?
I always nest it. Yeah, you're like, that's the
Yep.
reason I do it like that. Yeah, so that makes sense.
Cool. So that is our basics of the track mat and how we can kind of utilize shapes and text and different things like that to really start to composite these things in a really unique way.
And
Um,
I have one more question on this
sure.
for you that I think would be beneficial. Can you bring in any sort of PNG and do this, or does it need to be, what's your experience with that? I know, we don't necessarily need to open Illustrator and go there, but yeah, what do you think?
Yeah, that's how I prefer it. Um, Especially when we're talking about this nesting and doing the tracking on here. You could have easily created these two boxes within Illustrator. And there's a couple tricks to it as well, but the most important thing is that the Illustrator or the Photoshop file, when you're saving it, does have transparency in it. So exactly right, Fabiola. When we export that, we want to make sure we're exporting it as a PNG. And you also just want to make sure that it's set up properly. Oftentimes if you have Illustrator or Photoshop set up, you may just see a white background or a black background, and you may or may not know if that's actually transparent or a color shape on there. Although there's ways to kind of use the colors in there, we do want to make sure that it has transparency involved. Now, technically, it could be either one transparent because we have our reverse feature that we
Mhm.
could flip-flop that, but one of those pieces do need to be transparent. So normally what I recommend is creating either like a white box or a black box for your shape. I said box, but any shape, black or white as your shape. It could be text, could be a star, could be a box like we just created here,
Right,
anything.
you could get creative with it, right? You could bring in something more interesting. Could you bring in something textured, like something from Photoshop, or does, in your experience, to have to be like a clean vector image?
Yeah, so for the matte alpha, you definitely want to have it kind of a nice and clean, defined border essentially, and a clean
Hmm.
transparency. But you also could use, if we were to, I don't know if I can actually change this one now that I have it binded together. But if you did adjust your fill here to be a gradient,
Okay.
you absolutely could, and it would pick up on that. Now, there's kind of two things to that. One, if you're going to use a gradient, easiest way to do it is choose black and white values for the
Yeah.
transparency. And then on top of that, the other important thing when you're actually creating this is instead of the matte alpha, which is the default for our track matte, you would want to change that to matte luma, which is actually going to pick up on the gradient aspect of that. So yeah, great
Okay.
question.
Awesome. That's great because I feel like everyone tends to work across so many different programs, and when you want to kind of mix and match stuff and get really creative, those are the kinds of things that kind of make your video a little more unique or more to your own brand. So that's awesome. I am totally going to use that.
Yeah, and that's a great thing to know. It's almost essentially like making your own feather, which we're going to talk
Yeah.
about in a minute and on our next one. But feathering is going to allow you to kind of blend those things a little bit cleaner. In this case, with a gradient would be the way to do that.
Okay, cool.
Cool. So that is track map. Let's move on to something else. And this is something that I've been working with on my last job. We had a finishing team doing most of this type of compositing work, but
Mhm.
for the most part, this is a reality TV show. This is a documentary. So when the production team is on the ground running, they are worried about the story. They are focusing on capturing the subjects and the characters and the people and what they're talking about, as opposed to all the other things that are happening in life. So one of the things that we would run into all the time is we'd have, a license plate in there, or a an address would show up on the film, or maybe a logo that wasn't approved of would show up on there. So in those scenarios, we had to hide it essentially, right? We weren't approved to have that information on there, or we wanted to protect people's privacy. So let's talk about how we can actually kind of utilize these type of real life scenarios, whether it's in a big production or even just something that you're running and gunning and shooting on the fly. Let's talk about how we can actually blur some of those items out, or even hide them in a couple scenarios on there. And
Yes, I'm so excited to see this because I feel like especially now with, you know, just shooting everywhere you go, sometimes you want to like make your you don't want to show your home address, or maybe you should really blur out what's out of your window, or maybe there's someone's kid happens to go in the shot and you don't want to show them. These are the kinds
totally.
of things that you need to know. Otherwise, you just can't use the clip. So this is like a good way to an in between.
Right. And it's awful to shoot something and then to realize that, like, a handful of it is just like completely
Yeah.
out of bounds because of something simple like a license plate, or
Yeah.
a sign or a logo or something like that.
Yeah, this is one
Now,
way to save it.
the other reason that I really like to talk about this now is because I know that we have some generative AI tools coming out in Premiere later on, and I feel like this is just kind of a stepping stone to that. If you know how to do this, I feel like when those elements come out and we have those features available to us, like this is going to be like even easier. You're going to be halfway there to utilizing that brand new tool, which I don't know if we have a release on that, but I am super excited to share some of that stuff too. So
This is like a primer.
exactly, exactly. So let's get into it. Now, again, this is a stock footage that I pulled, and the reason that I pulled this one is, one, it looked very, reality TV, or it looked kind of like a real video being on here. And the other reason is it could have very easily had an address on the door or in the background on here. Now, for our purposes, to make it super easy, I'm just going to use this real estate sign that's there. We're just going to kind of blur that sign out, or even a portion of it if we want to. So let's go ahead and get into
Yes.
it. How are we going to do that? I'm going to go to my very first frame, just to make it easy on myself. Now I'm going to actually show two different ways of doing this, similar to what I did with the track mat, but I'm going to kind of give you some details on here. So first and foremost, I could select the item that I want, or I could duplicate this, or the other thing that I could do is just choose the effect that I want. So I know that I want to blur our realty for sale sign out.
Mhm.
So I'm going to go over to my effects,
Let's say
and
it's like
there's
a political sign, you wouldn't want it on your show or something
it's
like
it's
that.
actually funny that you said that, because when I downloaded this, I totally, after I like gave it a little test, I was like, it does kind of look like it's a political sign. So
Yeah.
also kind of timely, I guess.
Timely, timely. I know everyone's out there working this election season.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
So I already knew kind of the blur that I want to use on here. There's two of my favorite blurs that I actually like to use in this scenario. I'm going to use both of them in this scenario, but I'm going to use this one first, which is the Gaussian blur. It's a nice one. It's subtle. It does a really good job of blurring out the items without kind of having this crazy effect on it. I am going to use the crazy effect on the next one though.
Okay.
So first and foremost, I'm going to apply my Gaussian blur to the video track. Very similar to what we've been seeing before. Nothing happens, right? It's like, did I do something wrong? Do I need to add it 6 times?
Anticlimactic for sure.
Right? So I go over to my effects control and I can see that it is added, but our blurriness is set to 0. Now, that's actually fine for my purposes right now, because I need to see what I'm doing before I do this. I don't want to blur out the whole video, which is what's going to happen now if I turn that Gaussian blur up. So now we're going to take a look at these bounding boxes. I keep calling them bounding boxes, but they really are ellipse tool, our polygon tool, and our free pen tool, right? Our pen tool. Now you also see them under opacity. I want to be very clear which one you are choosing for this particular example. So in this case, we want to make sure that we are under the Gaussian blur effect and we're choosing the right one here.
Right.
Because our sign is pretty much square, we're going to go ahead and use the rectangle one. That's going to be a nice one for us. I'm going to position it into at least one corner there, and I'm simply just going to drag in each one of our corners here. So pretty easy start. Again, if obviously this is a square sign, so it makes it pretty easy.
But a
You
lot
may
of things
have
are
more
like that,
things.
You have like
Totally.
the address, a license plate.
License
Like
plate.
it's mostly going to be squares and circles unless, an exception probably.
Totally. So now what I'm gonna do is this is like the easiest thing that you can do in Premiere, and it's actually like I'm so glad that they've added this in, and it's used to be something that could essentially only be done in After Effects. Now it does
Mhm.
a really great job. So I do want to make sure that I'm actually on my first frame. So I should have done that to begin with. I was playing with it. Let me adjust this one more time, and you'll see why that is important in just a second here.
Okay. You know what
So
I was
cool.
just thinking? I never have to say the word Gaussian out loud. When you went to say it, I was like, oh, how is he going to say this? There are so many words in Premiere Pro that I only read ever that I never say out loud, and that was the first time for me after all these Adobe Lives. So
Well,
anyway,
I mean, by all means, somebody in the chat can correct me if I'm wrong. In the last Adobe Live, we had a mini battle of GIF versus GIF. I'm not going to get
yeah,
into that right now. But yeah, this one, Gaussian, I don't even know how else to
Gaussian.
say
I
it.
don't
So
know.
yeah,
Like I don't
please.
know. I don't know. I don't know. I'm
Yeah,
not.
where does
It's
it
kind
come
of like
from?
Bezier. I can't
Yes,
say it. I
Bezier,
can't
Bezier.
say
Yeah,
that word. I can't say it. But
exactly. The
they're like
pencil.
words that you read, and then when I go to say them out loud, I'm like, oh, actually, I haven't done this before.
Yeah,
But
all
anyway,
the time. Tomato,
yeah,
tomato, right? I
yeah.
would love to know if anybody knows what the Gaussian or however you say it, like what's it where does it originate? Is it French? Where does it come
To
from?
me, it came from
Let's get it,
Adobe. The only time
right?
I've ever seen that word is in Adobe.
That's
So
probably true. I don't think I've
maybe,
seen it anywhere
yeah,
else.
yeah, maybe they own it.
Right. All right, cool. So now that I have my box and everything relatively good. I added a little bit of a feather on there just to kind of blend it out from the background a little bit more. So now all I have to do, you see these little play head, there's a play, there's a
Mhm.
back, and there's this tracking setting, this little gear. I'm actually
Wrench,
going to
yeah.
click on that, the wrench. And I just want to make sure that my preview is selected. This is going to be crucial to what we're doing on here. But essentially, instead of having to map this go frame by frame and kind of select this, I'm just going to use this playhead and it's going to do all the work for me. So I'm going to click on that. And the reason that I clicked on that preview is because now I can actually see it's going
Watch
step
it.
by step, and I can see if it, loses its track or if I have to make any adjustments, I could easily just stop that. Now,
Yes, you did
the
have to do this before in After Effects. It's all coming back to me in a rush.
and it's getting
And
better and better too in Premiere specifically, so it's great.
that's awesome. Not having to do, not having to open one more program if you don't have to is always a lifesaver. But also speeding this all up is always good. I feel like when you have After Effects open, Premiere open, then you have After Effects doing this tracking. Things get a little wild. You might need to, upgrade your computer by that point.
Yep.
So it's
And
nice to
to
have both
that
together.
point, this is also something that you want to be aware of as well. The length of the clip is going to affect the progress here.
Yeah,
Other things that you have going on. So like right now, Adobe Live, our streaming service right now is probably taking a lot of my kind of computer RAM and everything like that too. So you can see it's kind of stuttering, which I'm glad I did one thing beforehand, because if that is the case, I don't have to wait for it. And then also, again, like Fabiola just mentioned, the performance of your computer is going to be a big factor on how long this takes.
right. Do you know if it is faster if you use proxies at all? I'm not.
It
I know
is
it is. Okay,
absolutely. Yep,
cool.
yep. Yeah, I don't know how much of a difference it makes on there, but yeah, if
Yeah,
you have proxy clips in there, it doesn't have as much information to feed into, so it is going to go a little bit faster.
right.
So
If you have this already baked, we
I
may as well go for
do.
it.
I do. So
Look at that.
I did make I did Martha Stewart this a little bit just in case something were to happen on there. Surprisingly enough, when I was creating this outside and just kind of testing it out, it was actually really fast. It was probably less than 30 seconds and it was done, ready to go. And essentially, this is similar to what we got. I've had a few adjustments that I'll kind of tail back so we can see it
Okay.
in full scope, but there's two things that you're going to notice. First and foremost, in our effects control, you're going to see just a plethora of keyframes that have been created automatically That's just tracking the camera movement and the bounding box that I first created on there. So this is what we got.
Oh, pretty good.
Yeah, it does a really good job of tracking that. And
That's awesome.
we could definitely take some more instances on there. I put the blurriness up to like 120 on there. So there's a few different ways that you could go about
Mm-hmm.
that.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the other thing, let's try it again with another clip that I have here. And again, I have it kind of baked in on this one as well. So in the off chance it's taking a long time, we'll deal with that. So that's one way. Let's grab this other clip that we tried before. Now, this is a really long clip, so I'm just going to kind of trim this a little bit just to make it, I don't know, maybe about 4 seconds, 3 seconds. 3 seconds might be better in terms of how slow or fast it is. We'll do 4 seconds.
Okay. Because it is in slow-mo.
Yeah, so it should be good.
Yeah.
All right, so in this case on here, I could take the exact same approach that I did on the last one, where I put the effect on it, I create my bounding or my map, and then I go ahead and let it do the track forward, right? I'm actually going to do something else that I did in the other one, just so you can see the difference on here. I'm actually going to duplicate this, again, holding down Option on your keyboard and dragging that up to another layer. And I'm actually going to go ahead and apply that effect to this one.
Okay.
A couple of rules of, or a couple schools of thought here, but for the most part, it's allowing me to edit the video separately from the video below it. So instead of actually having that effects control on there, there's a couple of things that I can do with that. But let's get right into it. So
see it in action. Sometimes it's better understood once you see it in action, which is why we're all here.
Exactly. So the first thing that I want to do is I do want to apply that effects to this new one. So instead of using our Gaussian, let's go ahead and do another one that I like, which is mosaic. Oh, did I spell it right?
Controversial here. Oliver Andrews in the chat says that they think it's supposed to be pronounced like house. Wow.
Wait.
Like Hausian?
Oh, Gaussian?
Gaussian?
Okay.
I don't know. This is unproven.
I love learning new things, so if that is the case, I will try my darndest to use that going forward.
It's German,
Gaussian.
apparently. It's a German scientist, German mathematician and scientist who came up with the image smoothing thing.
I love that. And I was so excited the fireworks went off in Zoom for me. That's how excited I was about learning that new thing. I love those things.
Okay.
All right. Well, thank you for that. That is great to know. I love getting a little history lesson on these things and where they came from. Of course, it was a mathematician that came up with, which means that blurring effect is probably some like crazy mathematical thing, right?
Yeah, like a pixel thing to reduce image noise.
Love that.
Thank you, Robert, for providing all that context, because I definitely hadn't thought about it until we were here live, and I was like, what is that actually?
Right? Awesome. Let's get to the bottom of it. That's so cool. All right, so back to this. So I'm going to use the mosaic instead of the Gaussian. I'm gonna still mess it up. I'm trying, Robert. I'm trying. So I added mosaic. Yeah, it's a little bit easier, right?
Yeah.
So I've added my mosaic one, and unlike the Gaussian one, it applied it right away, right? As opposed to everything else that we've doing, this actually does immediately take on the effect on there. Okay. So what I'm actually going to do, because I don't want to see that effect yet, is I'm actually going to click on our little FX, our little toggle on and off in the effects control to just hide that for a moment. Now I can actually see what I'm selecting and creating that map for. And let's go ahead and use the ellipse. When it comes to faces, that's probably the best one to use in this regard. So I'm just going to readjust this just a little bit.
Put all the points right on his face.
Yep. I think that's good enough. And then the other thing that you may notice on here is there's these little handles right here. These little handles are going to allow you to adjust the expansion of that, as well as the feathering of your selection. So cool. Always keep in mind that you can do that. You can also do it right from here too. You can notice that as I'm dragging this, my
Mhm.
feather on the effects controls also engaging with that as well. So just two different ways of doing that. I probably don't need that much feather. I'm going to put it at 25
There's always two different ways of doing something in Premiere.
or
That's definitely
three or
what
four.
I always learn from these streams.
Definitely. I feel like there's even more than two in some cases. You can right
That's
click
true.
on something, you can find it
Yes.
in your menus, you could find it somewhere else in the toolbar. So yeah, always different ways of doing that. All right, so now that I have my mask, the most important thing that I actually did not realize that I'm in is I'm right in the middle of the clip. So if I clicked on the play
Mm.
now, it's only going to track forward my from my playhead to the end of the clip. So I
So
do
you're
want
going
to
to be
make
missing the
sure
first half.
exactly. So let's go back to the beginning, make our adjustments to our map so it's tracking at the very beginning in the right location. It's not in the
Mhm.
right location from the start. It's going to only be tracking in that incorrect location
The
from the
whole
remainder
time.
of that video as well. So now that we're lined up, we're on the first frame. Let's go ahead and track forward. And I'm gonna give it a moment. If it takes a little bit too long to track forward on here, then I'll probably just cancel it and I'll pull up our other clip on here. But let's see. Let's see if it does our trick yet.
Let's see. Let's see.
It's trying.
You never know. It might surprise us. It might not. We might have to go to the fully baked one.
I'm not even seeing the progress bar at all. So it does
I'm
look
not
like I'll
either.
probably have to do
I was
that.
wondering if maybe it was just invisible for me, but okay. Why don't you
It
throw in a
happens.
little
It happens.
command S while we're here,
That's a great idea. If you don't know what Command S is, that's your save tool. You can also change your autosave to a lower number in your settings if you want, which on big projects, I definitely recommend doing, changing
Yeah.
it to like 2, 5, something like that. In this case, we'll just give it a save. All right, so
Okay.
it does seem to be struggling a little bit on here. So let's go ahead and go back to this one and you can see what it should have done. And I did
Okay.
adjust my mosaic a little bit on here, but this is what it should have looked like once you're done with that.
And you'd like to do it on a separate layer just to have one version with mosaic and one without, right?
Yeah, now in this case, I can go
You
ahead
did it
and
together here, I
I
think.
did it in this case, but let's go ahead and duplicate that. And then on the bottom layer, I'll just delete everything that we have going on with my mosaic.
Mm,
And then I can show you why the benefit of that. You don't see anything right now. It
yeah.
doesn't look like we've done anything. But let's say that you were trying to, I don't know, maybe have an effect here where this actually fades away. Maybe it's
Hmm.
revealing somebody. Maybe there's kind of a story punch that you're like, oh, this person was, you know, maybe it's like
They're
Superman, you
revealing
know?
like who was the trickster. It's the circle. They're revealing the
Ooh,
person
there
or
we
something like
go.
that, right?
Love it. Got to add the narrative flair on there. So
Hmm.
now that we have that, then you can do something like this. So it kind of fades away, or obviously you could add some sort of other effect and
Hmm.
adjust that a little bit. But now we're using that effect separately from the actual video. So think of some other use cases for that instead of just kind of a reveal aspect. But it's nice to have that as a separate layer. And if I really wanted to, I could actually select those. If I didn't want to have it taking up too many tracks in mine, I could go ahead and nest that up as well. So I could do blur, face, nest, I don't know.
Right. And now you have it treated together, but still separate in case you want to add any effects. And like you said, you can animate it as a whole, like as an
Got
individual
it.
clip. So totally see the benefits there.
Yep.
Wow, I feel like that's so handy. I see that often in reality shows, and I've been wondering actually, like, wow, that must have taken a lot of time in After Effects for that person to do like 5 faces. Um,
Yep.
I see it often in like The Bachelorette right now.
Sure.
Yeah, so yeah,
Yeah, so
now I
essentially
know.
anything that, if people don't get releases,
Yeah.
they have to blur their face. Again, logos, license plates, addresses, things like that, that could dock somebody or reveal their private information.
Hmm.
The two things before we walk away from this one and start going, kind of bringing all this stuff together in a green screen clip is you do want to be mindful of a few different things. Camera motion is going to be one factor that is hard to change. Obviously, if you
Yeah.
could put a stabilizer on it to begin with, that will kind of help a little bit in terms of the smoothness on there. But a really jerky clip may or may not perform as well in this regard when you're trying to do that track forward
Yeah.
setting. The other feature that you really want to be careful on, I had to eliminate a few of my test clips on here just because like and I tried a few like crowded city streets and things like that I could blur
Mhm.
faces, but oftentimes something was going to be crossing over the face that I wanted to. Now,
And then the tracker has a difficult time pinpointing it.
exactly. Now, if that was the case on there, I thought about still bringing that in because you can, scrub forward and you can track that at the moment of your playhead.
Mhm.
So if something did cross over, you could easily kind of skip over that area, add the, adjust your track mat, and then click on the play the track forward button again and pick up where it left off. So there is some practical use case on there, but again, fast camera motions or really unstable footage and something that's actually crossing the plane of that item that you're trying to mask out are going to be your two biggest factors in using this technique.
Yeah, and I feel like this is a big reason why a lot of things are filmed in New York, right? Like, because aren't the laws there friendly for film there?
I'm
For
actually
camera?
not 100% sure, but yeah, that's a good question
I'm
because you
pretty sure if you
constantly see
film,
busy streets, right?
yeah, I feel like in New York the laws are like if you film in public, it's totally fine to film in the streets and there's no like right to privacy. So you may be in a shot or you may not be in a shot without having to sign a waiver, but I think it's different everywhere you go. So
Yeah, I think there's a big thing with like public spaces that has kind of
yeah.
its own laws and things like that.
And
But
that's
yeah.
why in The Bachelorette, when they go to Europe or they go to Australia, that maybe they have stricter laws there. Anyways, I'm tying it all back together. I was meaning to ask you, do you have a favorite reality show since you were working on one, maybe, allegedly?
Oh man. I mean, there's so many good ones. I personally don't necessarily indulge, but I do get caught up in some of the same ones that my girlfriend likes a lot. Um, Below Deck is kind of a guilty
Oh,
pleasure of mine.
yes,
I don't know
yes.
why. I don't know if it's the yachting aspect of it or
There's a lot of
what.
different elements to
I don't
like
know.
hold on to, so I totally get it. Let us know in the chat what your favorite reality show is, just because we're here, we're on this topic. But also, while you're in the chat, bring your questions over for Jamie so that you can get your questions answered. There's a lot of tips and tricks that he's sharing here. If you're just joining now, we're here with Jamie McArthur. So let's keep on going, Jamie. What else do you have to show us, or just in the same segment, I'm going to call it?
Yeah, I think we're ready to move on to our green screen. So we're gonna
Okay.
apply some of the techniques that we just learned and kind of bring that into what could be a really complicated process, which is the green screen. So let me
Yeah.
slide over to this project that I have going, or the sequence that I have going on here. And before
Yeah.
we jump in, let's talk about some things. Well, Fabio, go ahead first.
I just want to give you a heads up that we have a little bit over 30 minutes to go, just so you know
Perfect.
how to pace this out. But I feel like there's a lot to cover here.
Yeah, definitely. I'll probably skip a few things in here because, green screen can get very technical. It
Yeah.
can be very tricky. And, even the clip that I chose here is not the most ideal. I kind of picked it so it could match my background a little bit better without doing a massive amount of color correction,
Hmm.
which is a whole other factor that we're not going to get into today. I'm going to try some sweetening tools to kind of blend your two clips together, or three clips, however many you're using. But for the most part, that could have easily taken another Adobe Live just talking about color correcting and blending two clips together. But long story
Definitely.
short, there's a lot of things going on in our clip that we have here. We have these little markers on here, which in this clip, it doesn't make much sense because normally you'd only need those markers if you have movement in your camera.
Mm.
So in this case, it doesn't make much sense that they have that, but they are there. We also have not the best lighting on our green screen as well. And if you're shooting this yourself, you want to be very, very deliberate about how you're lighting the green screen. You want to
Hmm.
be lighting it even. You want to be lighting it clean throughout. And the other most important thing is that you want it to be flat, right? So you can buy a lot of green screens out there. You can buy the pop-up ones. In fact, I have a $30-$40 one right here that I got from Amazon. It has a blue side, it has a green side on it. It's really useful. Again, it's about $40. And what I like about that is it does stretch it out. Occasionally, I do have to take a steamer to it to get out some of all the wrinkles. So there are
Yeah.
some tricks that you want to take on there. But you want to light your green screen and you want to light your subject separately and evenly. Now, the other thing that I really like about this clip here is we have this red. Well, first off, we have this guy with the leaf blower, which is hilarious and awesome. I love that.
Hmm.
We also have this red light, which is trying to mimic, the wherever wherever this
Whatever
person
they're green screening.
exactly. So in this case, I'll show you the background in a moment, but it's kind of like a sunset. It's got some effects on there. So this
Okay.
gonna kind of mimic our sunset or our sun, low in the sky,
Hmm.
sun. So where do we want to begin on this one? Well, first and foremost, talking about that light, talking about that guy with the leaf blower, you can tell that we have a pretty wide shot. And this is also a nice little technique for if you're shooting. Don't feel like the green has to fill the screen. A lot of people get caught up trying to make that green fill the entire camera, regardless of what lens you're using, which is almost impossible if you're trying to get a full body clip,
Yeah.
which this one is. Obviously, if you're shooting like, hip up or
A Zoom
shoulder
call would
or
be a little different.
medium.
Yeah.
Exactly. Be very easy like this right here. I could easily pop this green screen up, put it behind me, hide my entire background, and I'd be good to go.
You'd be on
In
the
this,
beach right now.
right? Exactly. I know Zoom could probably do it for me now too, but the other case here is, you don't have to worry about filling that. The most important thing is the action of your subject. So she doesn't move much, but she raises her arm and things like that. All of that action. So if you have somebody who's waving their arms or something like that, you want to make sure, or dancing, you want to make sure that they're entirely within the green screen for that
Duration.
clip, the
Yeah.
entirety of that clip. Exactly. So the first thing that we want to do is we want to create something that's called a garbage mask. Name kind of implies itself. We want to get rid of, not calling this guy garbage by any means. I don't want to be mean to him. He's doing a great job with that leaf blower, but we do want to eliminate some of the garbage or the excess of that. So
Okay.
let's do that first and foremost on here. So in this case, we've been using this all along, but most of the time we've been using it when we add a effect to it, right?
Hmm.
In this case, we're actually just going to go ahead and select using our pen tool, and we're going to create this mask. I'm going to go a little bit wide on her because she does have some movement,
Hmm.
and I'll be able to adjust this as I need to. I might even be able to keyframe it if I need to.
And
Oops.
does it matter here where you are on your where your playhead is? Does it matter in this one like it did in the last one?
Good question. In this one, it really doesn't because I'm not going to be tracking it. I'm going to
Okay.
be kind of scrubbing back and forth as I go through just to make sure that she stays within
That you're not cutting
the
it. Okay.
mat that I created. Exactly. Now, if I really, really wanted to, I would probably start keyframing this and kind of
Hmm.
getting a little bit tighter to the subject itself. Um, but in this case, I think we'll be good just in an essence of time. I'm going to kind of keep it how it is.
Okay.
So now we have our garbage mat. So we have everything kind of outside that green screen that we don't want. We don't have our leaf blower guy anymore. We don't have the light. We don't have that other stuff that was kind of on the left-hand side. So
You
now,
isolated her. You isolated
exactly,
her, but kept some of the green. That's important.
exactly. Yep. We want to kind of keep that. Yeah, if we were rotoscoping this or something like that, I could probably get a lot tighter. But in this case, let's give this a try. Now, right away, I can I can already see some differences in the green, but
Yeah.
let's go ahead and add the green screen effect before we get into discussing that.
Okay.
Um, Instead of searching for it, it is called Ultra Key, so you could search for it. I'm going to go ahead and just go into video effects, open up, twirl down our keying, and that's where you're going to see our Ultra Key. There's a few other ones like Color Key. Don't get confused by that. You could use that, but it's not nearly as powerful as the Ultra Key.
All
So we're
right.
going to click and drag our Ultra Key over to our clip. And just like we've been seeing time and time again throughout this tutorial, it does not do anything, right? We have to put the input in. We have to tell the effects control what exactly we want to key, what we want to do on here.
Hmm.
So by default, our key color is black or not set. So that is the first one that we want to set on here. Now, my best tip for this is, and the reason why I chose this clip is because we did have that hair right? Hair is going to be your worst enemy when it comes to green screening. That's going to be the thing that shows up the most. So let's get as close to the hair as possible.
Pretty
So
good.
not too bad with one click. It did a pretty good job. Like I said, we could tell from the very beginning that there was a difference in the green screen.
By her feet.
Exactly. The luminosity or
Mm-hmm.
just the way that it was lit, it's getting different greens. And Premiere is able to pick up on that. So in theory, we have a couple different greens that's happening, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Yes.
now the other thing, so I could actually be good with that and I could start adjusting and going into these. And we're going to do that in a minute. And before I actually do anything, let's just talk about some of these other outputs and some of these settings that you see here. Let's do the settings first because it makes a lot more sense if I just flip through here. The default is the default setting on there. Relaxed, you can see even more so the difference in those colors on here. Aggressive does a little bit better. We still have that problem on the ground though.
Mm-hmm.
And then for our purposes, and in most cases, you're probably going to use the custom one.
Ooh,
Not to
okay.
say that those ones won't work. Sometimes, if I had popped that green screen behind me with the current, all the current lighting that I have, and I wasn't going to do anything too crazy with my composition or my compositing, I probably could get away with just using
Yeah.
one of those settings on there. Now, what does this output do? There's kind of three things on here. I use one of them more than the other one. So composite is what it looks like currently. So that is going to be your true composite mixed with anything else. Obviously, we don't have any other clips in here. So that's what it's going to look like. Alpha is going to give you a black and white view of what that track mat is actually going to look like. And now we're actually seeing those details that I was referring to at the beginning with the difference of that green. Now we're getting a very apparent look. You can almost see that there is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different shades of green in here that is affecting that. Some people really like the alpha channel. I don't necessarily like the alpha channel. I like to see what I'm going to see when I'm editing that, but there's a big rule of thumb with that. Color channel, some people like this as well. Very similar to the alpha. It's going to give you kind of those banding colors that you can, again, adjust based on that channel versus
Mm-hmm.
the composite or the alpha channel. For my purpose, I'm going to go back to the composite.
Is that your
Now,
favorite?
I like the composite again, just because that's how you're gonna see it. So I
That's how
like
it's
to
gonna
see the
export. Yeah.
adjustments that I'm going to. Now, in the case like with her leg, where I'm seeing that nice defined green line on her
Yeah.
leg, in that situation, I may go to the alpha channel and kind of view that. But again, even now, if I go back to alpha channel, it's really hard to see that line, right? So I
Yeah.
can't really make a big difference, or I don't know what to adjust if I'm seeing it that way. The composite is going to actually allow me to see that. So that's what I prefer.
Cool. Good to know.
All right. So that is pretty good, but I'm not happy with the way that that is set, right? I want
Mm-hmm.
it to get a little bit more control on here. And I know that the feet are going to be a little bit problematic. So what I want to do is let's actually delete our Ultra key for a minute. Let's start from scratch. We still have our garbage mask on here. And let's go ahead and add that Ultra key one more time. But before we make any adjustments to that, we're going to play with these masks one more time. So originally to create the garbage mask, we used our pen tool under opacity, right? That created that mask that we have here, our mask path.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to use that same one here, or a combination of these in the Ultra key. So the first thing that I'm going to do is, I already mentioned that the hair can be really problematic. So I'm actually going to create at least 2 track mats for me, probably actually 3 now that I'm thinking about it. So I'm going to use my ellipse tool first and foremost. And we're going to do just her head, just with the hair.
Oh, okay. So isolating that area essentially.
Exactly. And let me just browse through a minute. I'll probably have to do a little bit of tracking here so I can see where that is. And I might even just expand this out just so I can get that full
Range of motion.
space.
Yeah.
Again, if I really wanted to, I could probably just start keyframing and moving that around and getting it really clean. But we'll just keep it how it is for now. I'm going to get rid of that just a little bit. Just want to make sure that all of her hair and all the motion is in that spot. That looks pretty good.
That looks
Okay,
good.
So now I'm going to use our little dropper tool and pick that green right by her hair, closest one to her hair. Looks pretty good, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
now I have this box here that's going to adjust that. Now the other problematic area was the feet, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I could keep going with this, but I don't want my adjustments for the head and the hair to be affecting any other area. So let's go back to effects. I'm going to click and drag the Alt key, bring that over, and now we have another Alt key here. Now this could start to get very confusing. So what I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
do is I'm actually going to name my mask here.
Organization is key, especially when you start having all these different effect layers.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm going to rename my mask here as hair, just so I
Mhm.
know that that is kind of the problematic area here. And then my other mask that I haven't even created yet, let's go ahead and make a bounding box for this. I'm actually going to do a square, and you can almost see where the drop off for the green screen happens right here. So I'm
Yeah.
just going to make sure that I have that covered. Maybe even just get a little bit over it just so I can adjust that. And same thing, I'm going to grab my dropper, and I'm just going to go somewhere really close to the feet.
Mhm. Okay, that's a lot better than before.
Right? So we're starting to see now that area obviously is a problem, is our problem child on there.
Yeah.
So we're going to adjust that a little bit more. But again, let's just get our basic ultra, let's get everything keyed out, and then we'll go in and make fine adjustments onto this one. So we have our last green on here. There's a few things in here. I feel like the first time that we did it, it did pretty good getting the rest of that. So
Mhm.
instead of creating 3, 4 ultra keys, we're just going to create one more, drag that Ultra key back over to here, go back to our effects channel, name our other mask that we just created feet. And now we have our last Ultra key here. I'm not even going to create any sort of boundary on there. I'm actually just going to go ahead and grab the dropper and get close to her again, somewhere near her arms.
So now this affects the whole clip,
And that's going to
regardless
adjust
of the mask
everything. Yep,
of the other
exactly.
ones. Okay.
Exactly. So it's grabbing all of those. So already, if I click off on that, it's doing a pretty good job. Again, we
Yeah.
can see some of those variances on here, and we haven't adjusted anything, literally anything in our Ultra key settings at all. This is just right out of the box with creating some masks and using the dropper
And
tool. So
applying it. Yeah.
already we have a pretty good start.
Mm-hmm.
Now, let's go ahead and drop in a background clip so we can actually see what this looks like and how
Yes.
we're going to composite this together, because just using the black background can be nice for some purposes, but I want to actually see what I'm doing. So I'm
Yeah,
going
and
to
how it's
drop this one in
affecting.
here.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. So now you're starting to see, okay, now I clearly need to make some adjustments
Yeah.
on some of our clips here, right? So the
Yes.
first the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm just going to feather out all of my Ultra keys for the most part. So my hair one, I'm going to feather that out just a little bit to have that blend. We'll go about, well, that's probably too much. Let me just do like 80. Next one down, let's feather that out a little bit too.
Remove those
All,
harsh lines.
yep, already the feet are looking a little bit better with that.
Yeah. Paloma in the chat has brings up a good point, which is that this has a little bit of a Stranger Things vibe going on here.
I like
So
it.
yeah, I can see it.
Cool. And yeah, the end effect will just be pretty cool because the background is actually like a time
Oh,
lapse, and
nice
then she's just kind of chilling there. So it'll kind of have a nice little time
contrast.
effect. So yeah,
Yeah.
I love that. I love the Stranger Things. It definitely has a Stranger Things vibe to
Mhm.
it. All right, so my last one, because I don't have the feathering effect on there. Oh, and let me actually just make sure that my full on one, I forgot to do my feathering for my opacity one. Let's feather that out a little bit too. That looks way better.
Yeah.
All right. So it doesn't really matter where you start on here. For me, I can see the most issues with the final Ultra key that I added in, which is kind of the general one, right? So let's go ahead and look at some of these adjustments now. There are a few different drop downs here that you can use. I'm going to be honest, there's only a handful of items within each of these drop downs that I use regularly when it comes to this. The other thing that's really important, I'm going to open up all these so you can just see all the different options that we have under our matte generation, matte cleanup, and our spill suppression, and then color correction. So lots of different items are
Yeah.
available to us. The most important thing that I could say, or the biggest tip here, is don't do too much on any of these. There's a fine line. It's almost like saturation. If you ever use saturation on photo or
Yes.
video, there's a very fine line between oversaturating and overdoing it on the effect. And the same thing is true of this one as well.
Keep it subtle.
Very subtle. Yep. And the other thing that I like to do is I like to kind of scrub back and forth while I'm taking a good look at my clips, just so I can see kind of what needs adjustment, what looks
Right.
better, kind of getting that
Not just in this exact frame where our playhead's at, right? In the totality of the
exactly.
clip.
Yep. So yeah, scrubbing back and forth through, and then also scrubbing through the actual
Ranges
item
there.
itself.
Yeah.
Yeah, the range itself. So let's see what we want to adjust in here. I'm not going to explain all of these just in the effort of time, but I'm going to point out the ones that I think are most crucial. In matte generation, most of these are just going to be talking about how much transparency, again, how much transparency is within a highlight or a shadow and things like that. The biggest issue that I see with using these tools up here, even the tolerance, is you start to see holes in in their subject. So if I
Mm-hmm.
mess with this too much, like highlight just so you can see, not getting much of the effect on there that I was trying to eliminate, but a lot of times you'll see
I
holes in the
believe you that it
shirts.
happens on other clips. Yes.
Yeah, holes in your shirts, holes in your skin, depending on the color of it and
Ooh.
how the lighting is. So you want to be a kind of sparing with those ones in here.
Yeah.
And always keep in mind that you can always revert any of these. So if you've been messing with it and you're like, I don't even know what I did, you can go back and reset these parameters with your little recycle reset parameter button. Now, for matte generation, the one that I use the most, and I think is the most useful, is your pedestal. Look at that. Just with a
Whoa.
minor flip in there, we're starting to see some dramatic things happen in there that's really
Yes.
crucial. So just in about 30, 40 points, boom, it already eliminated a huge amount of what I want. And let's just scrub through, just make sure that I'm not, seeing some weird things happening throughout.
The hair looks good too.
Yep. And that is such a problem. Hair
Yeah.
is probably the hardest thing to do, especially if you have like really curly hair, wavy hair, things like that. For whatever reason, the green screen is like very reflective. You'll see it on certain types of clothes
Yeah.
that you wear. You'll see it in your hair, and you'll see it on our skin. It reflects off our skin for some reason. I don't know why that is. I
I
guess we got a
know.
little
I
bit of
know.
green in ourselves. So the pedestal is probably one of my favorite tools. I think it's really easy to use.
That's
Now
so
let's
clutch. I had no idea about that. I thought you had to just like, well, you just didn't green screen well enough.
right, and you'd be surprised how often that happens. Because yeah, you're right. Lighting a green screen is really difficult, but
Yeah.
if you learn some of these tools, you'll realize that, especially nowadays, you can get by with
It's
not
forgivable.
so exactly. It's very forgivable. And
Cool.
when you use these techniques of creating multiple ultra keys, you have
Mm-hmm.
so much control and you can kind of eliminate any of those issues that you're running into. So
Sweet.
that was matte generation. Again, pedestal is kind of the main bread and butter of the matte generation. Now, the matte cleanup, this one may or may not work for us in this sense because we have a couple different ones going on, but this is going to allow you to adjust your matte. So let me zoom in a little bit so we can see what we're talking about here. So choke, you can see if I drag that up, it's
Oh,
actually
yes.
cutting in a little bit of that. Now, again,
Mm-hmm.
you want to be careful of how much you're doing that because if you start to go too far, when I'm at 100, start to get like straight lines and like this weird effect on there that's not blending with our
Yeah.
background
Stops
very
looking
much.
natural, right?
Exactly. But if I bring that down, you can see there's that little bit of green happening on there too. So if we
Mm-hmm.
just want to do a little bit, make it subtle, maybe 0.5 or maybe even 1, 2, something like that. I'll
Yeah.
do, let's do like 8. That's kind of a good number on there. again, subtle, but it might be enough to just kind of get rid of some of those green highlights on there. Same
Hmm.
thing with these other tools, like the soften is going to kind of do that, but I think the choke is probably your most important one in the matte cleanup on there. Sometimes I don't even
Okay.
use the matte cleanup because what I'm really trying to do is I'm trying to get rid of that green. And actually, let's zoom out a little bit and get to, let's zoom in on the legs because that was where that we really had that line. It actually
Yeah.
looks pretty good already.
Yeah, I think choke took care of a lot of it, but there's a tiny little sliver there.
Yep, you can see a little bit on there, and it's hard to tell if it's green. I think our background is helping a little bit because it's
Yeah.
green grass, so it's kind of hiding that a little bit. It almost just looks like we have a really bright light, which is is
It
correct.
does.
We have the
Yeah.
sun coming in, so that's nice. But we're going to use the desaturate a little bit as well. That way, it's going to take that green and just dumb it down just a little bit. Now, again, you want to be careful. If I zoom out all the way and you see what I'm doing,
Yeah.
you can make your whole subject black and white, which maybe
Could
that's
be
an
an
effect you're
effect.
going for, right? Yeah, you could do that.
A
But in this
different way to use
case,
the tool.
totally a different way to use the tool. But in this case, I'm just going to go to about, I don't know, maybe 45 sounds like a right number. And
Okay.
if you zoom in, we still have that little haze, but it's not nearly as green as it was. So that's going to do a pretty good job of what we want there.
Yeah, it's less of a green screen giveaway, right?
Exactly.
Because you
And
don't
you
have that little green edge all around the subject.
Exactly. And you can do the same thing with these ones with the range and the spill. The spill can help a little bit as well, but you want to be subtle with that. So we'll add just a little bit, maybe about 55. That sounds good. All right. And then last but not least is your color correction. Again, you want to be careful about this. I'm going to do a little bit of hue, maybe a little bit of luminance on here, just
Hmm.
because my subject is very red. My background is very blue and green. So let's just go ahead and give that a little bit of a hue there just to match it just a little bit. I do want some contrast, so I don't want it to be
Yeah.
completely green and completely orange. So maybe 15 looks about right. And maybe 19. 19 looks good.
That's the best part about being able to kind of I'm gonna say scroll through the range, but pull left and right on the range so you can see exactly like how the effect the amount of the effect. Because I know sometimes when I just type it in, I'm like, how big of a difference could it be between 1 and 2 points? But sometimes it's
Right?
just enough. Yeah.
Yeah, especially when you're looking at like the lumetri color, like exposure is a good example of
Exposure.
that. Like
Yes.
point one, it can be a big difference and it can actually like be too much in a lot of cases. So
Yeah.
yeah, even not just here, but in all of your tools, you know, go subtle
Go
first.
easy. Go easy. Take your
Exactly.
time going through there before you just commit to something a little more severe.
Yep. Now, the only other thing, I'm pretty happy with the rest of my stuff that's going on here. The only thing that I see is you can see there's that patch on the ground that we didn't mess with.
Mm,
Now,
yes, it's a bit of a haze.
I didn't mess with any of the controls on our feet or our hair yet. I haven't messed with the pedestal or any of those other ones on those ones. So they're doing a fine job just as they are. But let's go ahead and go into our matte generation for our feet one, which there I have.
Got
Good thing
it.
I have it labeled. Otherwise, I'd be like, I don't know
You'd be
which one
turning
is
them on and
which.
off, trying to figure
Exactly.
it
I'd be
out.
switching it and be
Yeah.
like, wait, okay, now I know. So let's do the pedestal just a little bit, and you can see boom, just a
Wow.
little bit is needed and it's
That
pretty
really
much
cleaned it up.
gone, right? It does such a
Yes.
good job. And I'm pretty happy with the colors, although you'll notice that I did go a
Mm,
little bit too far. I am losing a little bit of that foot. So let's pull that down, pull that back just a little bit. Oh, well, this is where we get tricky things happening, where it's like, do I want to do too much? How
because
far do I want to
the
pull
foot's a
this?
little green is the problem, right?
It's got a little bit of transparency. I'm starting to
Yeah.
see a little bit of that grass through the feet on there. So the pedestal, let's bring that up just a little bit more because that grass is pretty problematic.
Hmm.
And this one may be where I start to mess with some of the shadow and the highlight a little bit. So let's see. There we go. Shadow just a little bit,
Oh, yeah.
brings it up just a little bit. Starting to get a little bit of an effect below her feet, though. If you notice in the original shot, her shadow was on the ground.
Yeah, it was.
So we want to be a little bit careful on that one. And I don't think our highlight's going to do too much. Yeah, it's going to affect us a little bit more than we want. So I'm going to go ahead and say that that is good to go. I can sit here all day and mess with it, but
Yeah.
I think that's good enough for now.
Maybe
Now,
the real solution there, if this was for a real project that you were going to export, would be putting another mask there that just doesn't affect the feed as much, right?
totally, totally. And also the other thing that I could do just as easily is she doesn't move her feet much. So I could actually go all the way back up to our original mask, and I could actually just
Oh,
adjust that maybe just a tiny bit to get rid of that.
right, right. So just, yeah, you're totally right. She doesn't even move. So that would be a good way to do it. You don't
Yeah, let's
always have
just
to
make
treat it like
sure.
motion.
Exactly. We'll just make sure she moves a little bit, but that should be enough to at least
Hmm.
kind of get that out of there, right?
Yeah.
Very subtle. Now, I love that, and I love that our problem area is on the bottom here. So in this last minute or two, let's
We have
actually
we have a
do
five we have
something.
like 5 minutes, just so you know.
I love that. So what I'm going to do is I actually went ahead and I grabbed some fog from Adobe Stock as
Ooh,
well.
okay.
So this is just a nice little thing that we can use to kind of blend it all out. Kind of
Hmm.
add this item so it's blending out both of our clips here. Really quickly, it's too short for the rest of my clip. So I'm going to go ahead and drag this out and make it some speed. So if you use your keyboard shortcut R on your keyboard, which is also under here,
Hmm.
great stretch tool. It's one of my other favorite tools on here. We just drag that out and it'll automatically adjust the speed. So now we had about
Perfect.
66% and it's going to last there. Now, we've been talking about track maps all along. One thing that we did not talk about at all, because we've been using different, effects for this,
Yeah.
is your blend mode. Now, there's a lot of different blend modes in here, and I definitely recommend as you're playing and compositing, put something like this, like fog or some sort of visual effect over top of a clip, and just go down the line and see what happens with these tools. Now, I already know kind of the one that I want to use, which is lighten. That's going to be a little bit subtle. It's going to put a little bit of an effect on all of this. Now,
Yeah.
it's a little too strong for me as well. So with the lighten tool, I am just going to go ahead and drop our opacity down just a little bit, not too much.
Okay.
Let's go about 75 sounds about right. And now you can see when I play this together,
Yes, there's a bit of that haze coming through.
yeah, and it's covering up our problem area as well.
Yes,
So
yes,
so
definitely.
it's a nice little distraction to what's going on here.
It's
Now,
definitely the way that people put like noise on top of a design when you're just like, it's
exactly.
kind of looking not uniform or
Yep.
together. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very subtle, but like putting like a little paper texture or something
Yes.
over top of a full clip can really make everything kind of blend out.
Hmm.
Now, tying this all together in the last few minutes that we have, I'm going to select all of this right now, and I'm actually going to go ahead and nest this together. Let's do green screen nest. Now, this is a really cool thing that I can do. So let's go ahead and add some camera effects to this and we'll keyframe this out. So let's say that I wanted to kind of start when
Oh,
we didn't
okay.
even know what's going on. So I'm gonna adjust my position and adjust my zoom a little bit on here. Let's give it a little bit more sky. So something like that. And let me just make sure I'm centered by using my safe margins. Let's center her a little bit more. Cool.
We just
And
have like a minute or two here before we have to wrap it up. So if you have any questions, everyone in the
perfect.
chat, bring it on over. You can get your final questions answered here by Jamie.
So good. So I'm going to click on our stopwatch to create a keyframe. I'm going to
Hmm.
go forward maybe about, we're going to make this really slow. So I'm going to go forward most of the clip on here. And then I'm actually going to go ahead and reset our parameters to put it back to where our
Ah,
original one was. And just to make it easy, there's a few different things that you could do here. I personally like the ease in, ease out. I would probably do those separately, but since we're almost out of time, I'm just going to do ease in. Actually, no, I'm going to do ease out for both. And let's see what that looks like.
oh, it's so subtle, but it's so smooth.
And then it kind of gives that nice reveal effect as well of
Yes.
like, where is she looking at? What's going on?
It makes it so dramatic. It made it so much more Stranger Things, if we will.
I
I
love
know
it.
Sandra was, or Paloma was mentioning that Wow, everyone, we learned so much on this stream. Jamie, you took us through so many different effects, so many effects that I hadn't even really played with other than applying it like the basics. I feel like now I really understand all the different controls. So thank you everyone for tuning in today. We learned how to use masks, track mats, green screen tips, even some keyframing here. So we've gone through everything here with Jamie. And before you go, make sure to keep up with Jamie over on LinkedIn and check out his whole portfolio. I'm sure it'll be over on the chat so you can go and check everything out. And don't go anywhere because up next is Jonathan Amayo. He's going to give you essential tips for managing cloud and local storage in Premiere Pro, which is a huge thing. Like we were talking about with the nesting, it can be quite difficult to get everything arranged. So everyone, thank you so much. Thank you, Jamie. Anything else you need to mention before we head out? Anything else everyone in the chat should know?
Stick around because that one's going to be good. I also need to stick around and learn that stuff as well because,
Yes. You can
organization is
never
huge.
never optimize enough, you know? And there's always
Exactly.
new tools coming out. So thank you, everyone. Jamie, this was an amazing stream. I know everyone learned so much. So thank you. And I'll see you next time. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye.